A few playtesters put a portal on the floor here, and used the rising stair pit to skip the rest of the puzzle. We'll usually rework a level if playtesters discover a way to bypass chunks of the puzzle too easily. But in this and a few other cases where skipping ahead arguably takes more skill than solving the puzzle properly, we let the ninja solution stand.
This is a great spot to appreciate the recursive nature of portals. If you place a portal on each side of this hallway, you'll notice the portals seem to go on forever, similar to the effect you get in a Hall of Mirrors. In actuality, we support a maximum of 9 recursive portal views down any chain of portals. We achieve the impression of infinite recursion by copying part of the previously rendered frame onto the final portal in the recursive chain. It's not perfect, but it's inexpensive and effective.
We designed this room to draw the player's eyes to the box. The light from the observation room casts horizontal shadows that point at the box, which is directly lit by a warm light from the ceiling. This warm light helps the box stand out against the predominantly cool test chamber lighting. The varying size squares of the off-limit surface also help direct the player's attention upward.
This particular section went through several iterations because it's the first place where players are required to perform possibly the trickiest portal maneuver, the double fling. Originally, the room also featured an energy ball redirection puzzle. Combined with a new double fling skill, however, it proved to be too much for most playtesters. Overwhelmed players tend to not digest new information, so we simplified the puzzle to require only the double fling. To nudge players in the right direction, we also included visual hints, such as the previously introduced single fling theme, the pushed-out concrete slab with a checkerboard landing zone.
This puzzle requires players to redirect an energy ball through multiple portal placements. The multiple steps cause many early playtesters to panic and accidentally redirect a ball right into themselves, with deadly results. We redesigned the test chamber so that portals can only be placed in the top half of the room, which solved the problem by generally leaving players out of the ball's reach.
We noticed through our playtest that many of our players weren't aware of the fact that you could place portals while falling. Since placing portals as you are falling is essential to accomplishing flings and many other portal tricks, we implemented this puzzle so that the only way to solve it was to use the mid-air placement tactic. It took numerous iterations and lots of tuning before this consistently played well.
Perhaps the most important purpose of this final test chamber is to cement the double fling maneuver training. For previous flings, we employed a visual cue, a pushed out section of a wall. In preparation for the more freeform behind the scenes levels, however, we take the training wheels off. To proceed, players must realize they can double fling almost anywhere they want to, with or without hints.
In this puzzle, we wanted players to realize that, using portals, they can travel long distances in a short step. Originally, we had stairs from the ground level to the upper rooms. Many playtesters, however, were able to run from one room to the other quickly enough to consider it a solution, without ever thinking to use the even easier portal method. By changing the stairs to very slow-moving lifts, we were able to level the travel time for all player experience levels, thus making the intended solution more clear.
Sentry mode activated. Who's there? Are you still there?
For Portal, we wanted to create a turret that was different from the traditional Half-Life 2 turrets. The Half-Life 2 turrets are nothing more than mindless mounted guns. In Portal, we wanted the turrets to have personality, to be characters. The first step was a redesign of the look. Once we had the look of the new turrets, they seemed less like menacing machine guns and more like cute robots. And robots can never really be cute until they are talking robots. So the next step was creating the vocal characteristics of the turrets. Working with Ellen McLean, we settled on an innocent-sounding voice with dialogue to match. This juxtaposition of killing machine and innocent, non-aggressive personality ends up making the Portal turret a memorable character.
Even though we didn't want Portal to be too combat-heavy, we wanted to add at least a light combat mechanic. After a few less than successful attempts to actually realize this light combat concept, we settled on turrets as a good compromise. The turrets can be defeated with tricky portal maneuvers, but they're also susceptible to a more straightforward berserker approach.
Even though Portal tells a simple story, we created a lot of backstory. For Aperture Science, for its employees, for its rivalry with the hated Black Mesa, and for where all of this fits into the cosmology of Half-Life. This first Portal game doesn't reveal all of it, but we crammed a lot of little details into the environments. This area, for instance, called the Ratman Den, hints that there may be other people trapped in the facility.
We designed this hall so that players had to use a box as a shield, but many playtesters read it as an avoid the energy ball timing puzzle and simply left the box behind. We solved this in large part by having the AI talk about the box. A lot. Once the dialogue went in, playtesters went from routinely abandoning the box to never wanting it to leave their side. Since we weren't going to make the players lug a box around for the rest of the game, we had a scene at the end of the level where the players are forced to kill the box.
I know that I was told that, sort of the idea of Valve is that everything is planned. Everything is worked out in advance. But that's a big fat lie. Because the initial idea is started, and they bring an actor into the studio and they say, say these words for us. Say this computer-generated voice for us. Okay, I'll do that. Well, then that gives the creators other ideas. And it's a rolling process. You roll from one idea into the next idea.
The awful end of the companion cube serves a dual purpose. It adds a lot more sinister character to our already pretty sinister AI, while simultaneously training the player to use the incinerator, a key component of the final level. The training has a nice dramatic payoff, since players later get to avenge the death of their good friend the companion cube by stuffing some of the AI's important parts into exactly the same type of incinerator.
Creating the AI voice was a multi-step process. First, we ran every line of dialogue through an automatic text-to-speech program. In the studio, we cued the actress who plays Gladys, Ellen McLean, with the computer-generated sound file. She'd mimic it, and then over the course of several takes, adjust her performance to clean up any words that were unintelligible in the computer version. For instance, here's a line as Ellen delivered it.
Perfect. Please move quickly to the chamber lock, as the effects of prolonged exposure to the button are not part of this test.
Once the recording was done, we processed all of the dialogue to give it an extra computery edge. Here's that same line as it appears in the game, with the pitch constrained, pitch modulation suppressed, and the formant moved up.
Perfect. Please move quickly to the chamber lock, as the effects of prolonged exposure to the button are not part of this test.
As an actor, you come in, you do what you're told, you want to make your money, and sometimes you get good direction and sometimes you don't get good direction, but it doesn't matter, and you certainly don't tell the production team any of this. But you come in and they'll give you a lame line reading, and you're supposed to find some emotional value in that. But this is not what this team did. They would come in, for example, explosively indignant. That's a wonderful direction for an actor. So, I must say that the production team won me over, because so often I get bogus direction, but this time I was actually directed and had fun at all the sessions.
We use these moving platforms to add time pressure to puzzles. A sequence of simple decisions feels much more climactic under time pressure, in contrast to most puzzles in Portal, which can be solved at the player's leisure. Puzzles that aren't time-bound can be more complex, but at the expense of being less dramatic.
Sometimes little details make a huge difference. For instance, we had to add the left side to this wall to give players a visual representation of how thick it is. Without it, playtesters frequently thought that the hall had just gotten impossibly narrower, panicked, and stopped making rational decisions.
Before the player escapes the fire pit, the AI dialogue is all delivered in the computer. computerized monitor. After the escape, however, GLaDOS gets progressively more expressive until, by the end, she's cycling through a whole mess of emotions. The role required an actor capable of mimicking the computer-generated voice while still infusing it with some real character. Since we planned to end the game with a song, she also needed to have a good singing voice. The woman we ended up casting, Ellen McLean, is a great mimic, a terrific actor, and a classically trained operatic soprano, so that worked out pretty good.
In these new areas, we weren't using the surfaces the player is familiar with. The rules for which new surfaces portals can be placed on, and which surfaces are off-limits, needed to be taught. So, we created this area both to show the player they've escaped into the guts of the facility, and to retrain them in which surfaces are valid for portal placement.
I went to portals, I googled portal in game, and I went to the trailer, and I just loved it. I loved hearing my voice. And as I told the production team, I have never played a computer game in my life, but I want to play this one.
After players escape, we let them solve an old chamber in a new way. This reintroduction of a familiar space, which can now be solved in an incorrect way, helps convey the sense that players are cheating the system while forging their own path through the facility.
One bizarre fact of game design is that without some serious prompting, players will rarely look up. In this case, the prompt is a ladder. Most players will investigate where the ladder goes, which is up. The ladder actually falls apart as soon as it's touched, but by then it's served its purpose.
We designed the post-escape levels to give players brief glimpses of the inner workings of the Enrichment Center. This particular area exposes part of the storage cube distribution system. These little vignettes help make this section of the game visually distinct from the testing chambers, while reinforcing the idea that players are now behind the scenes.
Through playtesting, we discovered that fatigue set in if we didn't break up the more complicated, deliberately paced puzzles with problems that required the player to perform a much simpler task under time pressure. These pistons proved to be a good foundation for that simpler type of puzzle. Because they feature a moving surface, they also gave us an opportunity to employ some unusual portal transitions, such as ceiling to ceiling.
During development, we'd often run across some piece of level design that would break the portal system. For instance, this ceiling to ceiling transition was an unexpected edge case that ended up requiring a lot of effort to make work. We tried never to take the easy route of simply changing the level design to work with existing portal technology. We knew that once the game was out in the wild, custom map creators would stress the system in ways we hadn't even considered, so we made it as flexible as possible.
As the end of the game draws closer, we increase the ratio of time-pressured puzzles, like this turret ambush, to give the players the sense that they're approaching a climactic encounter.
An important design goal of these post-escape levels was to give players the sense that they're running wild inside the guts of the facility. With that in mind, we added plenty of nooks and crannies for players to crawl into or place portals through. This ended up being a tricky lighting challenge, as the areas needed to be bright enough to navigate while still being dim enough to feel like obscure, disused sections of the building.
Sarcasm. GLaDOS is sarcastic a lot. And that's so much fun. But while I was trying to do this, trying to build in all these emotions, I still had to maintain the computer sound and maintain the pronunciation of repeated phrases. You know, aperture science and the Enrichment Center.
These rocket sentries originally fired lasers. We switched from lasers to rockets after we introduced the glass breaking mechanic, mainly because glass shattering in a massive rocket explosion turned out to be a lot more satisfying than glass just slowly being melted by a laser. Originally, they also spoke, just like the bullet turrets. Because players often redirect the rockets with their backs to the turret, however, a distinct, uncluttered sound cue was required. The voice simply added too much noise to the rocket redirect mechanic.
Breaking this tube gives players a chance to test out their newly trained rocket redirecting and glass breaking skills in a slightly different context, which helps cement the training.